Hello, and welcome to HBO Succession, the analysis of a toxic family system, with Mandy Friedman, licensed professional clinical counsellor, and Andrew, her brother.
Hi there, Mandy Friedman here, licensed professional clinical counselor, clinically certified domestic violence counselor, clinically certified trauma professional level 2, the creator of SNAP, survivors of narcissistic and abusive personalities. And I'm back talking about Succession Season 4 with my brother Andrew. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Mandy. I'm excited to be back to talk about Succession. Today, we're going to cover episode 1 of Season 4.
We're going to dig into episode 1, and then we're going to go through each character and what their experience was like during this episode.
At the beginning of Season 4, the siblings are working together on a new project in ways we've never seen them united. And they've also gone no contact with Logan. Mandy, how did we get here?
At the end of Season 3, the children had united and they were poised to stop something that Logan was trying to do, which had to do with him needing the majority vote to change over power and basically write the kids out of the lineage of succession. But they were able to join together so that he couldn't form a super majority. But somehow Logan found out about their plan, and they show up and they're confronting him and they're like, "We're going to stop you." And Logan's response to them is pretty brutal. And he gets out the phone, or there's someone on the line, and he turns it on speaker, and it's their mother, Caroline. And you hear the pain in the children's voices as they realize that their own mother has sold them out by making a deal with Logan and her new husband to give the new husband what he wants. But in doing so, it takes the power away for the children to be able to stop their dad from taking the succession away from them. And it's quite, heart-wrenching, heartbreaking to watch them realize that this is what's going on. Roman begs Logan, says, "Please, Dad," and why? And they're just really hurt.
Anytime we see in the show someone choose business over family, it's kind of sad. You know what I mean? It's kind of sad. And so this is one of those moments that you're talking about here.
So they realize that their mom has fucked them over. Logan says, "You're playing toy soldiers. Like you're little children. You don't even realize what you're doing. I have you beat." Even the seat sniffer gets to be part of the deal, talking about Peter. "What do you have in your hand to offer?" So this is how this works. I win, first of all, and you have to have something to negotiate with, and you've got nothing. But when he says, "What do you have?" Roman says, "Love." Logan says, "Love? You coming in here with love? You're coming to me here with love, with your guns blazing that you find out later turn into sausage fingers? Don't talk to me about love." This is how it works. I fucking win. Fuck off, you nosy fucking pedestrians. This is how he's sending them away, and they are absolutely crushed. Both of their parents are abandoning them. Both of their parents are betraying them, and they realize that they have no one but each other. It becomes very clear that Tom was the leak. There's a scene there at the very end that, because they were wondering, how did he know that we were up, that this was happening? He was prepared, he was ready, but how did he know? And you see that Tom has a moment with Logan where Logan kind of pats him on the back, and Shiv sees this and it sinks in, and she almost has this sort of shivering response of trying to keep her shit together once she realizes what happened. And Tom even comes up to her and puts his hands on her to comfort her, and she gets very stiff and freezes up. So this is where we end. But then when we see them together in season 4, they seem like they actually like each other, these siblings. They're working together. They're making jokes with each other, but they're also being nice to each other. It's really strange.
They're making jokes together at other people's expense without going after each other necessarily, which is kind of fun. Tom's absence is auspicious, it's kind of interesting that he's not there. So let's go through some of the characters. It's easy to start with what people might think is the main character of Succession, and that's Kendall Roy. In the first episode of season 4, Kendall learns that Tom has been meeting with Naomi Pierce, and he's the one who figures this all out. We're going to talk more about Tom later, but there's something to this.
Exactly. And one of the things that Kendall says that I thought was funny, and it's a reminder of who Kendall actually is. He's saying that, whatever deal they're doing, it needs to be something that he can sink his teeth into and that it's going to keep his attention. Why? Because I've done the best drugs, he says, and he's like, just starts listing the drugs and how good they were. And so he needs something that's going to give him a high. And through this episode, he's kind of in the periphery. He's doing a little bit of wheeling and dealing. And it is true that he's putting 2 and 2 together about Naomi Pierce meeting with Tom, but he's really not taking charge. He's sort of being a lot more strategic and less impulsive right now. Why? He's more grounded. Why? Because they went no contact with their abusive father. All of them are seemingly kind of in a better place. Maybe Shiv not so much because she's going through a divorce. But Kendall seems like he's doing pretty well. And Roman seems like he's doing pretty well. It's likely that that's because they haven't been around their father. And that's allowed them to behave better and to feel healthier.
Proximity to toxicity is important. And they have kind of removed themselves from the situation, which is sometimes all you can do. Next, we'll talk about Shiv. And she has a lot going on this season. I mean, all the kids do. But she seems to be an equal with the siblings at the moment for maybe the first time. They're ragging on her, but in a way that's like, oh, we kind of like you. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to see that. She also is trying to get a new position. One of the things that Shiv is always working on throughout the show is trying to latch on to a big company. Sometimes it's, or someone running for office so that she can have a job that's important. We learn about the Pierce acquisition, and she wants to latch on to Pierce to go with them. She tells Nan Pierce about a step that she's taking to remove a conflict of interest.
During the negotiations with Nan, we got Roman and Kendall and Shiv that fly there to their estate, and they're ready to talk business. But one of the things that they have an issue with is culture, that, ATN does not really belong with the Pierce industry products because they're more leaning and more progressive. And ATN, as we know, is sort of like the Fox News of that universe that they're in. And at one point, Nan Pierce does make a comment about that there could be a conflict of interest with Shiv being married to the new head of ATN. So we learned that Tom's leveled up. He's the head of ATN. It'd be a conflict of interest. Shiv says, not a conflict of interest. We're getting a divorce. And that's the first time she's told anybody that. It's the first time that Roman's heard it or Kendall's heard it. And they kind of actually laugh it off and make sarcastic comments like, oh, it's so sad the day that love dies, as if it was real to begin with, But it shows you where Shiv is right now, that she is ready to make big, bold moves, and including pointing out that, hey, I'll divorce that guy if it means getting me where I need to go. We're just not married anymore. There you go. That's how they're going to protect Nan's legacy, is to keep her company in as a whole and to carry on their culture and if Logan gets a hold of it, he's going to dismantle it and break it down. So this is a big part of their sales pitch right here, is that, look, I'm divorcing this person. We can uphold the culture, and we can keep your company together.
Shiv and Tom are apart for most of the episode. Now, towards the beginning, she finds out that he's meeting with Naomi Pierce, which starts a little bit of a jealousy kind of thread through her through line in the episode. At the end of the episode, she happens to go home for the first time, maybe in a while. Tom's there. And so they kind of have a little run-in. She tries to rant at him, but he has his own kind of ammo to throw. Shiv has a tendency towards depression, we know, because she believes she's unlovable. And that's all part of this jealousy thing.
Tom, at a certain point, reaches out and says, hey, we talked about this, that we were going to be open with each other. And I just wanted you to know that I have been meeting with Naomi Pierce, but it's not romantic, but someone just saw us out, and I don't want you getting the wrong idea. I have been with her, but it's not romantic. And her instant reaction is, oh, it's romantic. Like she doesn't think for a second that it isn't. Kendall picks up on it and is like, and then he starts piecing it together. But Tom initiates by trying to be open, trying to be transparent. She, of course, believes that it is romantic. She throws in his face this new nickname that she heard that Greg and Tom were using, which is the disgusting brothers. And, she's trying to throw that in his face. But Tom has this very disarming way about him. And some might call it gray rock, which is a strategy that you use with high conflict people. He has a way of kind of de-escalating the conflict. But he does say, while you're throwing stones, basically, because she's saying nasty things to him, he says, if you'd like to go through a full accounting of the pain of our marriage, I can do that with you.
She doesn't want to do that.
No, she does not want to do that. She just wants to be mad at each other and he's wrong and she's right, and it's almost a threat in a way, because her response to that is, that wouldn't be good for me. That I don't think I can handle that, meaning that that's going to put her in a bad place, emotionally, and she just can't go through it. So I think in some ways, he kind of already knew that when he said that, but he is saying, look, I am choosing not to have conflict with you. I would rather us have loving moments right now. And they kind of do have a loving moment. So they sit down on the bed together, and they just sort of acknowledge between the two of them that the marriage is over. He says, this makes me sad. And she's like, yeah, right. Sure, you're sad. But you see that she's very sad. But she doesn't believe that he's sad. Even though he's telling her that, even though he's being tender with her, even though, he's not rising to the occasion and lashing back out at her. He's really showing her probably the most loving relationship she's ever experienced. And she doesn't believe that she deserves that kind of love. So she would never believe that he would actually love her in the ways that he seems to. She won't let him love her because she doesn't believe it's real.
Maybe it's nothing, but I find it intriguing that when Shiv gets cornered, she acts like Logan a little bit. She doesn't do apologies.
It's true. She doesn't do apologies. She's not going to have an accounting of her part and take responsibility. She expects that we're just going to move on and pretend like none of it ever happened. But I think in her case, because, she had the mother that she had, and we saw their relationship. I mean, God, at Shiv's wedding, especially, that relationship was on full display. I mean, having a narcissistic mom like that leaves you feeling like that you're never enough and that you're unlovable. Then you have a father who doesn't take you seriously, who calls you Pinky and pats you on the head and doesn't take you seriously, no matter what you do, no matter how perfect you are. It basically has taught Shiv that she is unlovable, but also no matter what she does, she's never enough.
Well, that's very sad and depressing, but that's what this show's about a lot of times. So next, let's talk about Roman, and Roman just kind of chilling, this episode. He's hanging with the siblings, when they make their pivot from the 100 to acquiring Pierce. He makes some hilarious jokes about the 100, but he's laying low a little bit this episode.
Roman starts to get frustrated because Kendall and Shiv are changing directions. They're working on this 100, but now they're interested in this deal with Nan Pierce. And he calls them out and he says, you only want this because you're trying to fuck Dad. And then he says to Shiv, you only want this because you're trying to fuck Tom because they're getting a divorce. But I'm actually trying to make a good business deal here. And then Shiv points out that Roman's just afraid of conflict. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty true. But we don't have a lot from Roman yet. Roman, we're going to our next episode and then the following episode and pretty much through the rest of the season, we're going to see a lot more from Roman. But for this first episode, he's kind of laying low. Yeah,
there's a little groundwork to lay to. It's important to have these low spots so when we hit the high spots, we notice them, So next, Mandy, we have Connor. And Connor is such a sad sack this season, even though he's a rich man and, he knows all about politics. He is at Logan's birthday party. And might I point out that this show began with Logan's birthday party. So that's how we know it's been exactly a year almost that this show's been going on. So all this stuff has happened within a year. And we even skipped some time between season 3 and season 4, clearly. Connor is very interested in keeping the 1% that he has worked so hard to earn. And he has to make a sacrifice maybe to keep this 1%. But then he asks Will if maybe she'd be willing to also make a sacrifice.
Connor at the birthday party is really nervous about his position with the becoming a presidential candidate. And he's right around 1% of, I guess, what votes he would have, but it's not quite 1%. It's actually a little under 1. But to keep the 1%, he needs another $100 million just to stay relevant in the conversation, he says. But it won't get him to be an actual candidate. It just keeps him relevant in the conversation. And Connor's saying this right in front of Greg's date, Bridget. Just, want to keep that in mind. Connor is struggling with the idea of spending more money on the campaign. So Connor approaches Willa about using their wedding as a PR stunt to help call attention to himself and therefore possibly push him over where he needs to be. And Willa says she's always wanted to have a nice wedding, but after pressuring her, she will begrudgingly agree and kind of goes along with it.
Next, Mandy, we have one of the big ones for this episode, and that is Tom. And as you mentioned earlier, Tom is now on another level. He is now Logan's right-hand man, and we learn that because he's making moves with Pierce on Logan's behalf. When Logan is talking to Tom, he refers to the kids as the rats. And this is when Tom floats an idea to Logan.
He asks Logan what would happen if he and Shiv got divorced. Where would I stand with you, basically? Would we be okay? And, he says, would you and I still be good? And Logan says, if we're good, we're good. Which is a vague response. And then Logan changes the subject. But Tom was happy with that response. He knew what he meant. And what he meant was, as long as you and I are okay, then we are okay. That means you prioritize this relationship. That means that I'm the one that you report to and that you have my back, and then we'll be okay. This actually starts possibly some of the next things that happen in relationship to Tom and Shiv's divorce. So now Tom and Logan are likely going to have a dialogue about the divorce with Shiv. Tom will likely ask Logan, hey, do you have any lawyers that you would recommend? So if they're good, they're good. And that means Logan's going to probably help Tom.
How is Tom handling the separation?
Tom seems to be handling it a little better than Shiv is. He's sad, but she's breaking down on the inside. She doesn't seem happy. She seems really pissed off. And Tom just seems sort of like a little sad, but I think she's sort of trying to resist this depressive episode that she could possibly, get sucked into. And she's trying to protect herself from that by avoiding her feelings altogether, which, let me tell you, as a therapist, that's never a winning strategy. As a therapist and a client.
Yeah.
That never works. Trust me.
We can all be a little avoidant at times. It is what it is. But so this is kind of where we get the bidding war between Logan and the kids, where we have Nan Pierce like on the phone saying things like, "Ooh, this feels so gross," while she's bidding, two family members against each other in a bidding war to the death. And it's pretty awesome. But, you're left wondering, how did the kids even know about this? All right. So that's what leads us to our next character and another big one for this episode, which is Greg. Greg shows up at Logan's birthday party with his +1. And Mandy, he is a cousin. He gets a +1, damn it.
He feels very strongly about this when Carrie approaches him about his date. He basically brings a stranger named Bridget to this birthday party. Carrie jumps right on it and pulls Greg aside and says, "Who is she?" And she's firing questions off like, "What's her last name? How many dates have you been on? Did you swipe right? And that's how you met her?" Is her last name Random Fuck? Because it seems like she's just a random fuck. And she says, "How do you know she isn't a hostile corporate asset planted to sabotage Logan?" I don't think that she was necessarily planted with the knowledge that she was going to be a spy, a corporate spy, but she certainly was posting things and tagging people and not really getting the context of where she was. So she was just sort of like telling, "Oh, I'm at this birthday party, and guess what? Logan's about to do this. And then so-and-so said something about that." So she's sort of like just doing the thing that Carrie's afraid of and is revealing private family secrets as a dumbass that just shows up at some billionaire's birthday party and doesn't know how to act. Tom approaches Greg and says, "So I've heard you've made a huge faux pas by bringing a commoner to the party." Oh, and then Greg starts bringing up the disgusting brothers thing. And Tom says,
Tom doesn't like it though, right?
Tom doesn't really like it. Maybe in private or before he might have liked it, but
not here.
He's just like, "Ugh, stop." Greg keeps going, "The disgusting brothers."
It's interesting too, seeing Greg needle Tom.
Yeah, and Tom wriggling.
Yeah.
Tom says, "You are a laughing stock in polite society." Tom lists the things Bridget is doing wrong at the party, like asking people personal questions and using the wrong hand towels. As they're standing there, Bridget walks up to Greg and says, "Maybe we should leave." Greg's like, "Why? Aren't you having a nice time?" And Bridget mentions that she asked Logan for a selfie. And then Tom's face is hilarious in this moment. Then she told Logan, "Congrats about the new deal. Cha-ching, am I right?"
Tom tells Greg this is a disaster. Greg knows it's a disaster. What does he choose to do?
He chooses to have sex or have some kind of sexual encounter with Bridget somewhere in the house, which then he comes to Tom to tell him, "Guess what I just did?" And Tom's like, "You are fucked. There are cameras everywhere. And you just made a sex tape for Logan."
Do you think that was Greg's whole reason for coming? Was to do that? Why would he do that? After just hearing everybody saying, "Get rid of this person," he takes her in another room and does something. It's like, it's such a strange situation. Maybe he was trying to get one last thing out of this situation because this relationship was about to end. Because Greg bails when it's time to get rid of the date. In fact, he lets Colin, Logan's best friend and driver, handle this situation.
We know that Colin had initially asked Greg to come along so that he could help explain to Bridget why they needed to go through her phone. Because at this point, they know that we need to see what she's been putting on social media, so on and so forth. And when Greg hears that, he starts tiptoeing back up the steps away and says that he thinks he's going to let Colin handle this alone. He says, I don't want to see what happens at Guantanamo.
he doesn't want to see how the sausage is made. Like, he presents it like it's a wise idea. I shouldn't see that. Like, I shouldn't see that. I should have plausible deniability when it comes to this. And Colin is like, oh, absolutely, because that's the same thing Logan probably would have done. So, but it turns out that Greg's date is the leak. And at the beginning of the episode, we saw Kendall figuring this out. So, this is how this all has come to be.
And let's not forget that Greg, with Tom's, strong suggestion, he goes to tell Logan what he did. We don't get to see the conversation between Greg and Logan, but he tells Tom, and Tom's like, so how did it go? And he says, well, Logan finds me disgusting and despicable, but he kind of smiled. I told him she's a bit wild and quite eager, and maybe she had some wacky tobacco, but that I never meant to soil these halls. And Tom's like, so basically she's a drug-addled cock monster and you blamed it all on her. You are so gallant. And then that's when Colin walks up and says, we need to get her out of here. Yeah. So it's just, Greg, this is what you call, I think, failing up. He fails, but he just keeps still somehow falling with going up the ladder, because he's a cousin. So
he's a cousin and he deserves
maybe that's what it is.
But with Tom being the head of ATN, now Greg is a powerful executive, and so it's no longer, it's funny, no one's coming up to him going, hey, this girl's out of your league anymore. They're saying the opposite. A lot of things presented in this first episode to let us know things have changed for these characters, and that's one of them. One of the people who things have changed for quite continually is Logan. And Logan is on hold. Nan Pierce puts him on hold during this bidding war. And Logan demands to be entertained. Roast me.
The thing about this roast is that what we know about his particular personality is that he actually will find stress relief by chewing people out and cutting them down. We know that some psychopathic personalities actually kind of get off on that, and it reduces their stress levels. It calms them down to hurt other people. So what he's trying to do is he wants to be roasted, but I think it's because he wants to roast all of them because that's going to make him feel better. So while he's on hold,
because he's on hold. Yeah.
It's a power move. She's doing a power move over him. So now he has to do a power move over them. He's like the abusive man that comes home, smacks his wife, hits his kids, kicks the dog, this is the same kind of person.
But he works so hard, Mandy.
Oh, but he works so hard. Exactly. So that's why he acts the way that he acts. So Carl doesn't do very well with the joke. He can't really come up with one. Frank says, oh, I've got one. Logan, that he's a tough old nut, and they're just looking at him like, what?
The thing about Logan is he's a tough old nut.
Oh, Christ.
But nobody wants to go to bat, and go against Logan and knowing that he's just going to roast you back. But Greg right now is he's reeling a little bit over just what happened. His knees bouncing, and he's like, Greg, come on, bring it on. And Greg does. And he says something like, you're mean and you're scary. And everyone in this room is scared of you, and I'm scared of you. And that's why people do what you say, is because they're scared of you. He just goes down that route. And then he says, oh, and by the way, where are your kids? Why aren't your kids at your birthday party?
You're mean. You're mean. You're a mean old man. You're a mean old bastard. And you scare the life out of folks. That's your thing. You're scaring me right now, and that's why I don't even know what to do.
Who wants to smell Greg's finger? Hey?
Admissions of what he really thinks is what it was.
And then, Logan gives him some licks back. He tries to give Greg a little roast back, and Greg's like, yep, I was expecting, he kind of just goes with it. But yeah, I mean, Logan is struggling. Logan is slowly, kind of losing control of things. He thinks he has the upper hand, but then he doesn't. And now the kids are trying to undercut him, and he's at his birthday party, which he hates being at his birthday party. He's just not in a good place right now.
The children win the bidding war, by the way, and they say the highest number.
Congratulations on saying the biggest number, you fucking morons.
And he is not happy. So we'll end our episode with Logan's thoughts on people and what they are. He goes out to dinner, to a diner, much like we've seen other characters do in the show to get away from the high society part, right? They'll go to a diner, and so at Denny's, and that's what regular people do. So he does that with Colin, his driver, and he has a very philosophical discussion about people.
And he tells Colin, you're a good guy, and that he's his best pal.
Terrifying.
And Colin's like, thank you, sir. That's very nice. And he asks Colin, what are people? And I think Colin starts to respond for a second and gets 2 words out. And then Logan just mows right over him. He's not really interested in what Colin has to say. He's just, he has the stage right now, and Colin is a captive audience. So he's just going to go through lamenting over a few things. But he says, what are people? They are economic units. I'm 100 feet tall. These people are pygmies, but together they form a market. What is a person? It has values and aims, but it operates in a market, a marriage market, a job market, money market, market for ideas, etc. And Colin says, so everything's a market. Logan says, everything I try to do, people turn against me. Nothing is the same as it was. Do you think there's anything after this? Afterwards? I don't think so. I think this is it. We don't know. We can't know. But I've got my fucking suspicions. So we've got a couple things going on here. And this is an existential moment for Logan. He's thinking about what's left after he's gone, and what power he'll have after he's gone, and what happens to us after we die. And he's telling us what he thinks, which is nothing. And knowing what we know is about to happen, to me, this is a meaningful moment. When he's talking about that he's 100 feet tall and they are pygmies, but together they make a market. It reminds me of a meme that's going around right now where it's a shark, and then there's the smaller fish that come together to make a bigger fish that's eating the shark. The phrase on it is, until we figure this out, they're going to win. When the common folk, the pygmies, figure it out, he might be 100 feet tall, but together we can swallow him up. Mm-hmm. And he's having this realization that he's coming to the end. And that his understanding of people is that he kind of needs them in a way because they are the market, but they are just units to him. They're not actually humans.
And that's all that there is. That all these things that he's saying, this market, this war of him versus the world, that's all there is for him. And that's all there is for any of us. And it's some things to think about. It's interesting to see him in a reflective moment like that, where he's showing vulnerability to no one really, but to us as the audience. And, this show is about a lot of things, but it's about that too. So I thought episode 1 of season 4 of Succession is fantastic. It is laying some groundwork, and we had some great character development just in a short period of time.
I can't wait to do episode 2. I love that karaoke scene, and we're going to get to that next time. So thank you for watching, for listening. Bye.
This has been HBO's Succession, an analysis of a toxic family system.